All right. So, you know that whole idea about educated women in marriage? That like stereotype you always hear about all these amazing women with degrees and not enough guys with diplomas to go around?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah. Well, get ready for a curveball because we're going to take a deep dive into some research that basically flips the script on who's actually facing a marriage decline.
Oh, wow, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. We're looking at this new working paper with a really catchy title, Bachelors Without Bachelors. And
I love that title.
yeah, right? It really grabs you.
Yeah.
But anyway, it basically shows how like economic factors are changing the entire marriage landscape.
Okay, so like the job market and all of
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So let's get right to the heart of it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
One of the most interesting things about this whole topic is that you might be surprised to learn that it's not just about a lack of educated men for educated women.
Right, like a lot of people just kind of assume that's the problem.
Yeah, that's kind of the common narrative you hear.
It is, yeah, it's a common misconception, and this research really kind of, throws that out the window.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack the real reasons behind this widening gap and what it means for the future of, relationships, families, even social mobility.
That's a big deal.
Huge. So to kind of set the stage a little bit, marriage was once a near universal expectation for American adults, especially like, mid 20th century.
Yeah, like, leave it to Beaver.
Exactly. Like everyone was getting hitched.
Right, but societal shifts have been reshaping the landscape of relationships for decades now.
Like a massive cultural earthquake shaking up traditional norms.
Exactly. And this paper identifies 3 key tremors causing this shift: economic transformation, evolving gender roles, and changing educational attainment.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one.
Sure.
Starting with the economy.
Yeah, so the paper really dives into how things like globalization and the rise of these service jobs have impacted men's earning potential, especially those without a college degree.
So we're talking about like the decline of those traditionally stable blue-collar jobs that once formed the backbone of the middle class.
Exactly, spot on.
Okay, so how does that economic reality tie into the marriage gap?
Well, the data reveals a striking trend. Marriage rates for women without a college degree have plummeted, while rates for college-educated women have remained relatively stable.
Wow, so that really flips the script on that common narrative, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not about educated women's struggling to find educated partners. It's about a whole different set of challenges facing women without degrees.
You got it. And the research uses some, pretty sophisticated statistical methods controlling for, various factors to demonstrate this. And a significant piece of that challenge lies in the economic prospects of their potential partners.
Okay, so you're saying that a woman's decision to marry is increasingly tied to a potential partner's economic stability, regardless of whether they have a degree or not.
That's one of the key takeaways.
Yeah.
And it really challenges those traditional social norms where men were seen as like the primary breadwinners.
Right, the whole, man as a provider idea.
Exactly. And now, even though women's earnings have increased across the board, it hasn't been enough to offset the declining economic stability of men without degrees in the same group.
So it's like a double whammy almost.
It is, yeah. It's this complex interplay of economics and societal expectations.
That's fascinating, and it raises some interesting questions about the evolving concept of, marrying down.
Right.
Traditionally, that often referred to women marrying men with lower social standing or education. How does this research kind of challenge that definition?
Well, it reframes marrying down in a really fascinating way. College-educated women are open to marrying men without degrees. But the research found a crucial caveat. Those non-college educated men were earning significantly more than their peers who didn't marry college graduates.
So it's not just about the diploma, it's about the earning potential within that peer group.
Absolutely. And it's not just some new phenomenon either. The study reveals that historically, a significant portion of college-educated women have married men without degrees.
Oh, wow. So that really debunks the idea that educational matching is prerequisite for successful marriages.
Right. And this ties into the larger trend of women's growing financial independence, especially those with degrees. That traditional economic incentive for marriage women seeking financial security through a partner that's shifting as more women achieve economic stability on their own.
So it's like the whole playing field is changing.
It is.
That makes you wonder if that perceived need for educational parity is like a more recent social construct, maybe fueled by the increasing emphasis on college degrees as a marker of success.
It's a really interesting point. And this whole thing begs the question, what does this all mean for men?
Yeah, because the data paints a pretty stark picture of the economic struggles they face, particularly those without college degrees.
No doubt about it. Structural changes in the economy, like we were talking about before, the decline of manufacturing jobs, for instance, have disproportionately impacted men without a college education.
They're facing declining wages, job instability, fewer pathways to, well-paying careers.
Exactly, and that feeds into that sorting we mentioned earlier. Men who are earning well, regardless of their education, they become more desirable partners, further disadvantaging those who are struggling economically.
Right. It creates this challenging cycle.
It's not just about meeting those, traditional expectations of being a provider. It's about navigating a system that often feels stacked against them.
Okay, so we've kind of laid the groundwork here, explored how economic shifts and evolving expectations for both men and women are, reshaping this whole marriage landscape. But I'm curious to hear more about those fascinating facts and deeper root causes you mentioned earlier. This is where it gets really intriguing, right? Like, what else did this research uncover?
Oh, yeah. Buckle up. Yeah. Tons of interesting stuff. So one thing that really jumped out at me was this. Even though we're talking about, economic factors playing such a huge role in this whole marriage gap thing, the paper also shows that, a significant portion of college-educated women have historically married men without degrees.
Right. We touched on that earlier, and it's crazy how it really challenges that assumption that, everyone's got to find a partner with the exact same level of education.
Exactly. It's not about checking boxes, and this historical trend just really underscores how economic factors and just personal compatibility can often trump those traditional expectations about matching diplomas. Another fascinating insight is this. As women's wages have risen, the economic incentive for marriage has changed, especially for women with college degrees. That traditional model of marriage as a necessity for financial security that's evolving. And that leads to different priorities when it comes to relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. If a woman can, achieve financial stability on her own, it changes the whole equation of what she might be looking for in a partner.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding someone to pay the bills anymore.
Right.
And get this, the researchers predict that this trend will likely continue for younger generations.
Wow.
Which could lead to even more dramatic shifts in the whole marriage landscape.
That's a pretty significant projection. It raises all sorts of questions about the future of marriage and family structures. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's dig into those root causes driving these changes.
Okay.
What are the fundamental factors that are shaping these new marriage patterns?
Well, a big one is, the decline of those middle-income jobs, particularly in manufacturing. We were talking about how men without college degrees have been hit hard by those economic shifts.
Right. Those classic blue-collar jobs that used to offer a pretty reliable path to a middle-class life.
Exactly. As those jobs have kind of disappeared, often due to things like automation and outsourcing the economic prospects, for a lot of men without degrees have really taken a hit. And that directly impacts their appeal as potential marriage partners.
So it's like a domino effect. The loss of these jobs leads to lower earnings, which then ripples out to affect women's choices and the overall marriage landscape.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And we can't overlook the role of evolving gender roles and expectations in all of this. As women have entered the workforce in greater numbers and achieved higher levels of education, their expectations for partners have changed too.
You're saying they're looking for more than just a provider. They want someone who's compatible, supportive, shares their values.
Exactly. Economic stability is still important, of course, but it's not the only factor. Women, particularly those with higher education, are looking for partners who can contribute to, like a shared vision of a fulfilling life, both financially and emotionally.
Right. And let's be real, those expectations aren't limited to women. Men are evolving too. They're facing their own set of pressures and expectations as those traditional ideas about masculinity are being challenged.
Oh, absolutely. And on top of all these economic and social shifts, there's a broader cultural shift happening in how people view marriage itself. Alternative family structures, cohabitation, single parenthood are becoming more accepted. So marriage isn't seen as the only path to a fulfilling life. That traditional model of the nuclear family is being redefined.
It's like the definition of family is expanding and becoming more diverse. And that opens up new possibilities and choices for everyone, regardless of, their gender education or economic status.
It does. And as those cultural norms continue to evolve, the decision to marry becomes much more of a personal choice based on, individual circumstances and priorities. It's not about following a predetermined script anymore.
It sounds like we're moving towards a future where relationships are less defined by those traditional roles and expectations and more about finding a genuine connection and partnership based on shared values and goals.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about finding a connection that works for both individuals, regardless of societal pressures or outdated norms.
I love that. So we've gone from busting myths about the marriage gap to exploring the very real economic and societal forces that are shaping the landscape of relationships. It's clear that this isn't just some isolated trend. It's a reflection of much deeper changes happening in our culture and our economy.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
This research has profound implications for how we think about education work, gender roles, the future of families.
This conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about. What are your biggest takeaways so far from all this?
Yeah, it really is amazing how this whole deep dive has kind of, flipped the script on this whole marriage gap conversation.
Yeah.
We started by debunking that myth that it's all about a shortage of educated men.
Yeah, we did.
And we've uncovered way more than just who's marrying whom. We've explored those economic realities, the evolving gender roles, the changing cultural perceptions of marriage itself.
Right. It's like a whole web of factors.
It is. It's like we've zoomed out to see the bigger picture, and it's way more complex than just looking at education levels.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I think it's important to circle back to that, key takeaway here.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the big aha moment from all this?
Well, the marriage gap isn't primarily about a lack of educated men. It's about the economic struggles of men without college degrees and, how those struggles impact women's choices. Exactly. And that realization has huge implications for how we even approach this issue. It's not just about encouraging people to get married. It's about tackling those root causes, creating more accessible pathways to well-paying jobs for people who don't have a 4-year degree.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We need to think beyond just individual choices and really look at the systemic barriers that are preventing people from achieving economic security and forming those stable relationships.
Right. It's bigger than just, telling people to, go get married.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we want to see a real shift in these marriage patterns, we got to focus on creating economic opportunities that allow everyone to thrive no matter what their background is.
It's like we're talking about a whole societal shift here, not just tweaking a few dating app algorithms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, this all leads to a final thought-provoking question for you, our listeners. As economic and educational factors continue to shape marriage patterns, what does this mean for the future of social mobility and equality?
Ooh, that's a big one to ponder. Are we headed toward a society where marriage and the stability it often brings becomes even more closely tied to economic status?
It's a valid concern for sure. And if that's the case, what happens to those who are already facing economic disadvantages? How do we make sure that everyone has a chance to build those strong, supportive relationships and families, regardless of their income or education level?
Right. These are questions that we all need to be thinking about and talking about.
Absolutely.
It's a sobering thought for sure, but it's also kind of like a call to action. We can't just shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's just the way things are. We need to engage in these tough conversations, challenge our own assumptions, and work towards solutions that create a more, equitable and just society for everyone.
I wholeheartedly agree. Sometimes, understanding the real story like we've done today, that's the first step towards meaningful change.
Yeah. It's so true. Well, this deep dive has definitely given us all a lot to chew on. Keep these questions swirling in your mind as you go about your day. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the marriage gap. Until next time, stay curious.